The intention of this video is to illustrate ways to effectively look at the role of the executive director and the board member, legal responsibilities and responsibilities to society and to a not-for-profit organization like a Center for Independent Living. Your responsibilities to society and the law will be discussed. Responsibilities that must guide the work that is done by you as a director of your organization. This video will show how the board works within the legal framework, because a not-for-profit organization is a legal entity controlled by its board of directors. The three primary duties entrusted to a board member are the duty of care, which measures the prudence of actions in a situation; the duty of loyalty, which considers actions in good faith and in the best interests of the organization; and the duty of obedience, which monitors actions within the requirements of law and within the organization's rules, regulations, bylaws, and mission. These levels of involvement will make certain that you've taken the right steps in assuring the success of your organization. It will maintain good ethical standards and good management practices, like making sure there is a clear separation between board and staff roles. Let's meet the board. Along with a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's in rehabilitation counseling, amputee Chris Jordan brings years of experience as a state vocational rehabilitation counselor and disability services coordinator at a state university campus to the position of executive director of the Central Edwardsville Center for Independent Living, or CECIL. A sociology professor at the local junior college with a track record of service on the boards of a number of successful grassroots not-for-profit organizations, Board Chair Monica Tate has a knowledge of disabilities and is respected by local public policymakers for her leadership. With a background in accounting, Board Treasurer Frank Dominic is an executive at Edwardsville Savings and Trust, who is dedicated to bringing CECIL's internal financial and payroll systems up to snuff, and has used his substantial influence in the community to arrange the center's temporary space-sharing arrangement. Former college professor Susan Ali was recently invited to join the board as its secretary to provide the high-tech knowledge she has gained as an employee of a local computer software company. A wheelchair user, she believes assistive technology can play a major role in empowering citizens with disabilities to live more independently. This is the first board membership for architecture graduate student Arnold Miller. A wheelchair user who has paraplegia due to spina bifida, he is passionate about remedying architectural barriers to access. One of the core group of 25 consumers who originally founded CECIL, self-made businesswoman Sherry Crispell, is a polio survivor with a history of strong advocacy for people with mental health disabilities. She chairs the program committee. A legally blind veteran who works as an attorney for the state university, Francisco Frank Gomez, is considered the board lawyer, although that's not a formal position. A bilingual advocate, his principal concerns are providing services to consumers in the Hispanic community. John Nagel is well qualified to serve the CECIL board as the chair of the Personnel Practices Committee, as his day job is Director of Personnel for a local truck assembly firm. Although active in planning and gaining funding for the creation of CECIL in 1999, Hannibal Toy Company manager Wayne Kennedy has only recently joined the board and was promptly named chair of the Marketing and Public Relations Committee. Another member of the Public Relations Committee, Pine Hills Middle School teacher Carrie Kempfer, is hard of hearing. A supporter of physical education and recreational programs that meet the needs of students with disabilities, she led a community fund drive to build a playground for children with limited motion abilities and physical impairments. To put these points into perspective, let's take a look at a typical board meeting.
We're in the middle of our annual audit, identifying our assets and our liabilities, so I'd like to defer the financial report until I can sort out the audit. You can assume that we're in the same financial situation as we were last month at our last meeting. So if that's acceptable, I'd like to defer a more detailed report until the audit is finished.
I didn't understand anything that he said. Do you think it would be okay if I asked him for an explanation?
You're pretty new to the board. There's no reason to be embarrassed about not knowing something. I think you should ask.
And that brings us to new business. Chris, why don't you begin by filling us in on the new program possibilities that you and I were discussing this morning?
If you'll turn to my executive director's report, you'll see a fact sheet I've written up on the proposed new program. Because we need to act very quickly, I'm going to ask each of you to take a moment to study the fact outline. This program gives us an opportunity to serve a whole new sector of the community, but we won't qualify for funding unless we act immediately. I think it's important to serve new people. Plus, this program could bring in money, and with our limited budget, it's something else to consider.
I agree. This sounds like a good program, and I'm certainly as concerned about our limited program budget as much as anyone. But I think we should slow down. This program may or may not fit into our vision. I don't know for sure, but I do know that we'll have to study it carefully to find out.
Fitting into the mission is certainly an important point, but this still sounds like a good possibility to me. Could the chair of the program committee and Chris study this proposal to see if it will legitimately fit within our mission? I'd like a report from the chair at our next meeting, and if it fits in and we like the idea, we'll pursue the funding. It does concern me that we haven't planned for any possibilities like this. You know, in fact, we haven't even had a planning session.
No, we haven't. I remember from my experience on another board that seeing to it that the organization has a plan is a board responsibility.
You're absolutely right, Sherry. I'd like to ask the executive committee for help on this. Would the committee members and Chris work up a proposal on how to go about developing a plan and present it at our next meeting? Let's take a break here.
Let's consider the preceding segment. In the case of Susan, the secretary, not understanding a point made by Frank, the treasurer, clarification is absolutely necessary. The entire board and staff must fully understand, otherwise it doesn't meet the minimum level of involvement necessary for the function of financial management. It's also a part of the legal duty of care. Your legal responsibility is to act as any prudent person would in the same situation, which requires informed, careful attention to the affairs of the organization. It is imperative that everyone who joins the board receives a full orientation. The other minimum responsibilities in financial management are to approve an annual budget, then monitor that budget through treasurer reports, to make certain that the budget is balanced, to oversee the annual audit, to oversee the financial management, and to make certain you're in compliance with tax and corporate law. In the case of the new program being proposed under new business, Frank Gomez, the board lawyer, raises a valid concern. If the board operates outside of its mission, it raises the question of compliance within state and federal law. All program plans must be approved annually. There must be agreement on how programs are evaluated, and program accomplishments must be overseen. The planning function that Sherry addressed is a primary function of any board. It ensures that there is a good vision of the future. Other requirements include establishing the organization's guiding values and adopting a mission statement that identifies the organization's beneficiaries, that defines the general business that the organization is in, and that defines the end results sought from the organization's efforts. Finally, short-term and long-term goals should be in place, and that there are good ways to monitor the progress of the plan. Let's return to the meeting.
We've had some very positive reactions to our financial development plan. In fact, we can count on some good corporate support from places we haven't even expected it. Also, neighborhood church groups are willing to work with us, but there's a problem here. 5 of us have made some contribution. We all need to contribute, or it will be very, very hard to go out into the community and ask for money. If we cannot successfully do that, once our seed money is gone, we're out of business.
Even though you didn't ask for a report this time, I've been working on a draft of personnel policies. Now I need your participation, perhaps through a board task force to take my draft and develop it further for board adoption.
As long as we're talking about personnel matters, I'd like to bring up a problem that we're having with a member of our staff. Although I like our new secretary and I think she's doing a good job, I question her skills and experience in dealing with our volunteers.
I appreciate your concerns, Carrie. I think we've covered a lot at this meeting. I'd like to call for a motion for adjournment at this time.
A primary function of board members in the area of financial development is that all board members contribute. Two other minimum requirements include the creation of a development plan, then to monitor the development plan as it progresses. Minimum responsibilities of the board in human resource management is to set personnel policy, determining the need for an executive, developing the executive job description, then hiring and supervising the executive. Compliance with all of the employment laws must also be maintained, establishing an affirmative action plan and monitoring the organization for policy compliance. Whenever a personnel dispute is encountered that cannot be solved at the executive staff level, the board will have to act as the court of last resort. Regarding Carrie's concern about a staff member's performance, the board meeting is not the place to be raising individual staff performance questions. The executive director is the head of the staff organization and is responsible for hiring and supervising all employees. Communications about individual employee performance should be directed to the board chair, and the chair will convey the concern to the executive director. The board's job is to establish human resource management policies in cooperation with the executive and to oversee the implementation of these policies. Now let's take a look at the board's next meeting.
Before we begin this meeting, I'd like to bring up something that's really bothering me. It's the lack of information. I'm looking at this agenda, and I'm not very confident with my contribution. I'm uncomfortable, and I'd like to be able to contribute more.
John, I really appreciate your frustration and your interest. Chris, is there anything that you or your staff can do to help us with this information problem?
Well, first, we need to find out exactly what kind of information the board needs. Even then, if you need statistical analysis, we could be in some trouble. We just don't have the computer capacity to do much more than word processing. I really don't know what we're going to do.
I want to talk to some of our computer people at my bank. We're in the process of upgrading our equipment, and we might be able to make something available.
That would be very helpful.
Thank you, Frank. Chris, what's the status of our new brochure?
Wayne, Carey, and I have spent a lot of time on this, and we're really pleased at the way it's taking shape. We've been working with the staff to get their ideas, and we've held focus groups with stakeholders in the community. We've produced a brochure that we feel represents our values and our core programs to the community. I was able to talk a design house into contributing all the graphic design and production, and I think we'll be able to get a price break from one of the biggest printers in the area. I think you'll like the brochure. It tells our story effectively.
It's excellent. Thank you, Chris, Wayne, and Carrie. I think it's a good example of the executive director and the board members working together. Now let's take a break.
Dealing with information is one of the most important functions a board and executive director must perform. The board is trying to find out what kind of information is needed, who needs it, and ensuring that the organization can generate that kind of information. The board must then use that information for planning, for decision-making, and for oversight. As chair of marketing and public relations, Wayne is keeping efforts in that department right on target, meeting the board's minimum responsibilities that the organization's target audience is understood, that we know how well they're being reached and served, that the organization is linked to external groups as well, and that the organization publishes an annual report. You may think that the term marketing is too business-oriented, but from a management perspective, sensitivity to the thoughts and feelings of your consumers should be demonstrated. In order to provide better service, you need to be aware of developing attitudes and ideas to understand the current scope and reality of your consumers. Now let's consider something under the umbrella of board affairs. Let's listen in on the treasurer's recommendation for the nomination of a new board member.
Al's a friend. I've known him for many years, and he has an excellent reputation in his real estate business. Best of all, he is exactly the kind of office space we're looking for. He also told me that if he gets on our board, he would reduce the rent to almost the level of a gift.
I know Hal too, and you're right. He is a good guy. But I wonder if that's the real issue here. As I look around the table, I wonder if we really do need another board member. And if we do, is Hal's experience and background what we really do need? I think we better take a strong look at what we really are and what we have to offer and what we need to round out our strengths.
I know Hal too. But if he becomes our landlord after he's on the board, this can cause some troubles. We want to handle this potential conflict of interest carefully. Granted, he'd come on the board first, but he'd have to disqualify himself on any vote on his rental space. I suggest we deal with the space rental issue first, then consider Hal for the board.
An issue such as director nomination is one of the board's minimum requirements to assure continuity. The board must define itself by its bylaws, then to establish an evaluation procedure to check board performance, to check for effectiveness and efficiency, and to take action to improve itself in any perceived area of weakness. As for the conflict of interest potential, whenever such a conflict exists, any board must take care so that the interested board member meets his duty of loyalty and that all board members meet their duty of care. The board must always act in the best interests of the organization. The board's interests must always come before personal interests. This doesn't mean that the organization can never do business with a board member. However, the conflict of interest must fully be disclosed and discussed. The interested party must not vote on the matter, and the deal must be at least as good as an outside deal would be. The board has the responsibility to help new board members acquire a working knowledge of the organization's mission and goals, understand the population served by the organization, and know the personnel involved in providing the service. The board can make the new member feel more familiar with the organization by having a board member or a committee of the board members welcome the member. They should provide specific information about the organization essential to what the person's performance will be on the board. The orientation is conducted by the members of the board, which should include a facility tour and a conference with the executive director. The new member should be presented with a carefully prepared packet of written information. This should include the organization's annual report, a table of the organization, a description of board members' responsibilities and meeting dates for the year, the center's budget, the organization's constitution and bylaws, the mission statement, the program's services, and a copy of the certified audit. This process of orientation will assure a good beginning for the new member.
Well, not only did we cover everything that was on the agenda today, but I think you all feel a lot more comfortable with the way our organization's working. And it's working very well. You should all be very proud of all we've accomplished in such a short time. I know there's been a lot of frustrations along the way, but look where we are. All I can ask is that we keep the momentum going, and if we do, we will have the finest organization of its kind anywhere.
As a board member, you are providing the organization with the leadership and the management skills that draw on your area of expertise and insight. There are many reasons why you became a board member and decided to serve on the board, but there is one reason why you remain committed: because you believe in what you're doing. We hope this video has helped give you a perspective of your role and the scope of your responsibilities. Thank you for your attention and dedication.